The blood trails on the hay-covered floor were what Fletcher Yates would never forget, not even in his oldest years, when memory became as thin as morning mist over the canyon. He had been mending fence posts that September afternoon in 1878 when his blue heeler cattle dog, Duke, started barking with an urgency that made Fletcher's spine straighten and his hand instinctively reach for the rifle leaning against the barn wall. Duke never barked like that unless something was desperately wrong. And as Fletcher ran toward his barn in Buffalo, Wyoming, his boots kicking up dust from the drought-hardened ground, he had no idea that his entire life was about to change direction like a river finding a new course through ancient rock. Duke stood at the barn entrance, his whole body rigid with attention, hackles raised along his neck as he barked toward the shadowed interior where the afternoon sun had not yet reached. Fletcher approached cautiously, his eyes adjusting to the darkness inside, and that was when he saw her. A young woman was collapsed in the corner behind stacked hay bales, her dress torn and bloodied, her face pale as fresh snow, and her dark hair matted with sweat and dirt. She had wedged herself into the tightest space possible, as if trying to disappear into the very wood of the barn itself. "Easy now," Fletcher said softly, setting his rifle aside as he knelt down several feet from her. Duke had stopped barking but remained alert, his tail low and concerned. "Nobody is going to hurt you here. Can you tell me what happened?" The woman's eyes fluttered open, and Fletcher found himself looking into the most striking green eyes he had ever seen, eyes that held terror and pain in equal measure. She tried to speak, but only a whisper came out, too quiet for him to hear. He moved closer, slowly, like approaching a wounded deer that might bolt at any sudden movement. "My name is Fletcher Yates," he said, keeping his voice gentle. "This is my ranch, my barn. You are safe here. Can you tell me your name?" "Katherine," she managed to whisper, her voice cracking with thirst and pain. "Katherine Nash. They shot me. I ran. Please do not let them find me." Fletcher's jaw tightened as he examined the wound on her side, where her dress was soaked through with blood. The bullet had grazed her ribs, tearing through skin and muscle, but miraculously missing anything vital. She had lost a fair amount of blood, though. An infection was a serious concern out here, miles from the nearest doctor in town. "Who shot you?" Fletcher asked, already pulling off his work shirt to press against the wound. He wore an undershirt beneath, standard for working in the Wyoming sun. "The Garrett gang," Katherine whispered, her eyes closing again. "They killed my father, took everything. I was hiding in the wagon when they found me. I jumped and ran. I have been running for 2 days." Fletcher knew of the Garrett gang. Everyone in Wyoming territory knew about them. They were a ruthless group of outlaws who had been terrorizing settlements and isolated homesteads for the better part of a year, always staying one step ahead of the law. They killed without hesitation and took everything that was not nailed down. If they were after Katherine, she was in more danger than she probably realized. Men like that did not like witnesses, and they had a reputation for tracking down anyone who escaped them. "We need to get you cleaned up and that wound tended to," Fletcher said. "Can you walk if I help you?" Katherine tried to stand, but her legs gave out immediately. Without hesitation, Fletcher scooped her up in his arms, surprised at how light she was. She must not have eaten in days. Duke trotted ahead of them as Fletcher carried her from the barn toward his small ranch house, a sturdy building made of logs and stone that his father had built 20 years earlier. Inside, Fletcher laid Katherine on his bed, the only real bed in the house. He lived alone and had for the past 3 years since his father died of pneumonia, and his mother followed 6 months later from a heart that simply gave up. The house was clean but sparse, with only the necessary furniture and none of the decorative touches a woman might add. "I need to clean this wound," Fletcher told her, already heating water on the stove and gathering clean cloths. "It is going to hurt. I have some whiskey that might help with the pain." Katherine's eyes opened again, focusing on him with an intensity that made him feel suddenly self-conscious. "Thank you," she said. "You could have just turned me away. Most would not want the trouble." "Most folks are not worth much then," Fletcher replied, bringing the supplies to the bedside. He helped her sit up enough to drink some water first, then a small amount of whiskey. "I need to cut away part of your dress to reach the wound properly. Is that all right?" She nodded, too exhausted and in too much pain to be modest. Fletcher worked as quickly and gently as he could, cutting away the bloodied fabric to expose the wound. It was ugly, but could have been much worse. The bullet had carved a furrow through the flesh along her ribs, but had not penetrated deeply. He cleaned it thoroughly with whiskey, which made Katherine gasp and grip the blanket beneath her, but she did not cry out. "You are tough," Fletcher said with genuine admiration. "I have seen grown men scream from less." "My father taught me not to show weakness," Katherine said through gritted teeth. "He said in this territory, weakness gets you killed." "Your father sounds like he was a wise man. I am sorry for your loss." Fresh tears rolled down Katherine's cheeks, carving clean lines through the dirt on her face. "It happened so fast. We were camped outside of Sheridan, heading south to join my uncle's ranch near Casper. They came at dawn. My father tried to fight them off, but there were too many, 6 of them. They shot him before he could even reach his rifle." Fletcher finished bandaging the wound with clean cloth strips, his hands steady despite the anger building in his chest. The Garrett gang had become bolder lately, attacking larger groups in addition to isolated homesteads. Something needed to be done about them before more innocent people died. "You rest now," Fletcher said, pulling a blanket over her. "You are safe here. Duke will alert us if anyone comes near the property, and I am a light sleeper. We will figure out what to do in the morning." "I cannot stay," Katherine protested weakly. "If they track me here, they will kill you too." "Let me worry about that. Right now, you need to rest and heal. You will not make it far in your condition, and I would not be much of a man if I sent an injured woman back out into the wilderness alone." Katherine's eyes were already closing despite her protests, her body demanding the sleep it desperately needed. Fletcher watched her for a moment, this mysterious woman who had appeared in his barn like some kind of divine intervention. He had been living alone for so long, had grown accustomed to the solitude and the simple routine of ranch work. Now everything felt different, charged with a purpose he had not felt in years. He made himself a bedroll on the floor near the door and settled in with Duke beside him, his rifle within easy reach. Sleep came slowly as he listened to Katherine's breathing, making sure it stayed steady and even. Outside, the Wyoming night was alive with the sounds of crickets and distant coyotes, the same sounds that had filled his nights for years. But tonight they sounded different somehow, as if the world itself had shifted on its axis. Morning came with the rooster's crow and golden sunlight streaming through the windows. Fletcher woke to find Katherine still sleeping, which was good. Her body needed time to heal. He moved quietly around the house, starting coffee and making breakfast. The smell of bacon frying in the cast-iron skillet eventually woke Katherine, and she stirred in the bed, wincing as she moved. "Easy," Fletcher said, bringing her a cup of water. "Take it slow. That wound will be tender for a while." "How long did I sleep?" Katherine asked, her voice stronger than the night before. "About 12 hours. It is just after dawn now. Are you hungry?" Katherine nodded, suddenly aware of the hollow emptiness in her stomach. Fletcher helped her sit up, propping pillows behind her back, and brought her a plate of bacon, eggs, and biscuits. She ate slowly at first, then with increasing urgency, having not eaten a proper meal in days. "This is wonderful," she said between bites. "I did not realize how hungry I was." "Your body needs fuel to heal. Eat as much as you want. I have plenty." As Katherine ate, Fletcher studied her more carefully in the morning light. She was young, probably in her early 20s, with delicate features that could not hide the strength in her jawline and the intelligence in her eyes. Her dark hair, now that it was not matted with dirt and blood, fell in waves past her shoulders. Even covered in dust and wearing a torn, bloody dress, there was something undeniably beautiful about her. But it was more than that. There was a resilience in her eyes, a determination that spoke of someone who had faced hardship before and survived it. "I should tell you everything," Katherine said after she finished eating. "You deserve to know what you have gotten yourself into by helping me." Fletcher refilled her coffee and his own, then sat in the chair beside the bed. "I am listening." "My father was Samuel Nash. He owned a small cattle operation outside of Sheridan. It was not much, but it was ours. 3 months ago, the Garrett gang came through demanding protection money. My father refused. He said he would not be extorted by criminals. They left that time, but they promised they would be back." Katherine's hands trembled slightly as she held her coffee cup. "My father decided we should leave, go south to my uncle's place where there would be more people, more protection. We packed what we could and left 2 weeks ago. We thought we had gotten away clean. But they must have been watching, waiting. They caught us 3 days out from Sheridan." "Did they know you escaped?" Fletcher asked. "I heard them talking after they shot me. I had fallen into a ravine, rolled down into some brush. They thought I was dead. One of them wanted to go down and check, but their leader said I was not worth the effort. They took our wagon, our supplies, everything. I waited until dark and started walking. I did not know where I was going, just away. I have been walking and hiding ever since. Fletcher thought about this carefully. If the gang truly believed Katherine was dead, they would not be looking for her. But if they discovered she survived, they would come hunting. Men like that could not afford to leave witnesses alive. "You cannot go to the law," Fletcher said, thinking out loud. "The sheriff in Buffalo is a good man, but he does not have the resources to protect you long term, and the territorial marshal is stretched thin across hundreds of miles. If the gang learns you are alive and talking to the law, they will come for you before anyone can do anything about it." "Then what do I do?" Katherine asked, and Fletcher could hear the fear beneath her brave facade. "You stay here," Fletcher said firmly. "At least until you are healed and we can figure out a plan. My ranch is remote. I do not get many visitors. If you stay inside and keep out of sight, nobody needs to know you are here." "I cannot ask you to put yourself in danger for me," Katherine protested. "You do not even know me." "No, I do not," Fletcher agreed. "But I know what is right and what is wrong. Leaving you to fend for yourself when you are injured and being hunted is wrong. My parents raised me better than that." Something in Katherine's expression softened, and she looked at Fletcher with an openness that made his heart beat a little faster. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I promise I will not be a burden any longer than necessary." "You are not a burden," Fletcher said, surprised to find he meant it. "Truth is, it has been quiet around here. Duke and I could use the company." At the sound of his name, Duke came over and rested his head on the edge of the bed, looking up at Katherine with soulful eyes. She reached out hesitantly and stroked his head, earning a pleased whine and a tail wag. "He likes you," Fletcher observed. "Duke is usually more cautious with strangers. He must have good instincts about people." Over the next few days, Fletcher fell into a new routine that included caring for Katherine. He changed her bandages twice daily, checking for signs of infection. Fortunately, the wound was healing well, though it was still painful for her to move much. He brought her meals and books from his small collection, mostly adventure novels and collections of poetry that had belonged to his mother. Katherine proved to be better company than Fletcher had anticipated. She was well-read and thoughtful, with opinions on everything from politics to philosophy. They talked for hours in the evenings, Fletcher sitting in his chair while Katherine remained in bed, and he found himself sharing things he had not spoken about in years. He told her about growing up on the ranch, about his father teaching him to rope and ride, about his mother's garden that he had let go to weeds after she died. "Why did you let the garden die?" Katherine asked one evening as the sun set outside, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Fletcher was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "I suppose because tending it reminded me too much of her. Every plant, every flower, she put there with her own hands. After she was gone, being in that garden just made the emptiness worse." "I understand," Katherine said softly. "After my mother died when I was 12, my father could not bring himself to play the piano anymore. She had taught him, and every note reminded him of her. He sold it eventually. I think he regretted that later." "Do you play?" Fletcher asked. "A little. My mother taught me before she passed. I was not as good as her, but I enjoyed it." "There is an old piano in the church in town," Fletcher said. "After you have healed, maybe you could play again." "Maybe," Katherine said, a small smile crossing her face. "If I am still here, and if it is safe." By the end of the first week, Katherine was able to get out of bed and move around the house, though she still tired easily, and her side ached with every movement. Fletcher had washed and mended her dress as best he could, but it was still torn and stained. He rode into Buffalo one morning, telling her he had business to attend to, and returned with packages wrapped in brown paper. "What is this?" Katherine asked when he presented them to her. "Open them and see." Katherine carefully unwrapped the first package to find 2 new dresses, one a simple calico print suitable for everyday wear, and the other a nicer dark green fabric that brought out the color of her eyes. The second package contained undergarments, a nightgown, and a thick wool shawl. "Fletcher, this is too much," Katherine protested, even as her eyes shone with gratitude. "I cannot accept all this." "Yes, you can," Fletcher said firmly. "You cannot wear that torn dress forever, and you need proper clothes. Consider it payment for the company. I told you it has been quiet around here." Katherine stood and, before Fletcher realized what she was doing, wrapped her arms around him in a quick embrace. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "For everything." Fletcher stood frozen for a moment, acutely aware of her closeness, the smell of the lavender soap he had given her to wash with, the warmth of her body against his. Then she stepped back, blushing slightly, and he cleared his throat awkwardly. "You are welcome," he managed to say. I will be outside doing chores if you need anything." He escaped to the barn, his heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with exertion. Duke followed him, and Fletcher swore the dog gave him a knowing look, as if amused by his master's discomfort. "Do not start," Fletcher told the dog. "It is just being neighborly, that is all." But even as he said it, Fletcher knew it was more than that. Over the past week, Katherine had become more than just someone he was helping. He found himself looking forward to their evening conversations, to the sound of her laughter when he told a funny story, to the way her face lit up when she was excited about a topic. The house felt warmer with her in it, more alive. He had not realized how lonely he had been until she arrived. As another week passed, Katherine grew stronger. She insisted on helping around the house despite Fletcher's protests, doing light chores like cooking and mending. She had a talent for making simple ingredients into delicious meals, and Fletcher found himself actually looking forward to dinner rather than seeing it as just another necessity. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" Fletcher asked one evening over a stew that Katherine had made from vegetables from his small garden and a rabbit he had shot that morning. "My mother taught me the basics, and then I learned more by necessity after she died. My father and I had to fend for ourselves. He was a good rancher but a terrible cook. I learned quickly or we would have starved. Well, this is better than anything I have made in years. You have a real gift." Katherine smiled, pleased by the compliment. "It helps when you have quality ingredients to work with. Your garden is not as dead as you think, by the way. There are still some plants producing vegetables. I harvested some today. With a little attention, it could thrive again." Fletcher looked at her across the table, at the way the lamplight caught in her hair and made her eyes sparkle, and felt something shift in his chest. "Maybe you're right," he said quietly. "Maybe some things just need the right attention to come back to life." The air between them grew charged with an awareness that had been building for days. Katherine held his gaze for a long moment before looking down at her plate, her cheeks flushed. "Fletcher," she began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with what to say. "I want you to know that being here these past 2 weeks, it has meant more to me than just safety and shelter. You have been kind and respectful and patient. You have made me feel like a person again, instead of just a victim. I do not know how I will ever repay that." "You do not need to repay anything," Fletcher said. "Having you here has been good for me, too. This place, it was starting to feel more like a tomb than a home. You brought life back into it." "What happens when I am fully healed?" Katherine asked, voicing the question that had been hovering between them for days. "Where do I go?" Fletcher had been thinking about this very question, turning it over in his mind during the long hours of ranch work. "Your uncle's place near Casper, is that still an option?" "I suppose so. I have never actually met him. He and my father had a falling out years ago over a land dispute. They only recently reconciled through letters. I do not even know if he is aware of what happened to my father." "We should get word to him," Fletcher said. "Let him know you are alive and safe. Then you can decide what you want to do. If you want to go to him, I will take you there myself. Make sure you arrive safely." "And if I do not want to go to him?" Katherine asked quietly. Fletcher's heart hammered in his chest. "Then we will figure something else out." That night, after Katherine had gone to bed in his room, while he prepared his bedroll on the floor as he had been doing, Fletcher lay awake staring at the ceiling. He had to face the truth that had been growing clearer with each passing day. He was falling in love with Katherine Nash. It was not just her beauty, though she was beautiful. It was her strength, her intelligence, her kindness, despite everything she had been through. It was the way she laughed at his jokes and the way she looked at him like he was something more than just a lonely rancher living in the middle of nowhere. But what did he have to offer her? A remote ranch that barely turned enough profit to keep going, a simple house with no luxuries, a life of hard work and isolation. Katherine deserved more than that. She deserved safety and comfort and a real future, not the uncertainty of life with a man who spent most of his days mending fences and chasing cattle. The next morning, Fletcher rode into Buffalo to post a letter to Katherine's uncle in Casper, The town was bustling as usual, with wagons bringing supplies and cowboys from nearby ranches coming in for provisions. Fletcher stopped at the general store to pick up flour and coffee, and that was when he heard the conversation that made his blood run cold. "I am telling you, Ed," one man was saying to the storekeeper, "the Garrett gang hit another homestead 2 days ago, the Morrison place over by Clear Creek, killed the whole family, even the children. They are getting bolder." "Someone needs to do something," the storekeeper replied grimly. "Where is the law when you need it?" "Marshall is supposedly tracking them, but they always stay ahead. It is like they know where he's going to be before he gets there." Fletcher bought his supplies quickly and headed back to the ranch, his mind racing. If the gang was operating this close to Buffalo, there was a chance they could come near his property. He needed to be prepared to defend Katherine if necessary, but he also needed to be smart about it. He could not take on 6 outlaws by himself. When he arrived home, Katherine was in the garden, kneeling by one of the raised beds his mother had built. She had tied her hair back with a ribbon and wore the calico dress he had bought her. She looked up as he approached, shading her eyes from the sun. "Look," she said with excitement, pointing to a row of green shoots. "Carrots. They were still growing under all those weeds. And there are tomato plants that just need some support and water. This garden wants to live, Fletcher. It just needs someone to care for it." Fletcher dismounted and walked over to her, helping her to her feet. "Katherine, we need to talk. Inside." The seriousness in his voice made her smile fade. "What is wrong?" Inside, Fletcher told her what he had heard in town about the gang's recent attack. Katherine went pale and sank into a chair. "They are coming closer," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It is only a matter of time before they find me." "Not necessarily," Fletcher said, though he was not entirely convinced himself. "They think you are dead, remember? There is no reason for them to come here specifically. Unless someone sees me, unless someone in town mentions to the wrong person that Fletcher Yates suddenly has a woman staying at his ranch. People talk, Fletcher. You know they do." She was right, and Fletcher knew it. In a small town like Buffalo, news traveled fast. He had been careful not to mention Katherine when he was in town, but someone could have seen him buying women's clothes and drawn conclusions. "Then we will be ready," Fletcher said with determination. "I have guns and ammunition. I know this land better than anyone. If they come, we will be prepared." "I do not want you dying for me," Katherine said, tears forming in her eyes. "Maybe I should just leave, go somewhere far away where they will never find me." "Running for the rest of your life is not living," Fletcher said, kneeling in front of her chair and taking her hands in his. "Katherine, listen to me. I know we have not known each other long, but these past weeks have meant something to me. You have meant something to me. I am not going to let anything happen to you. We will get through this together." Katherine looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. "Fletcher, I feel it too, whatever this is between us. But I am so afraid. I am afraid of bringing danger to your door. I am afraid of caring about someone and losing them like I lost my father. I am afraid of letting myself hope for something good when everything has been so terrible." Fletcher reached up and gently wiped away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "I am afraid too," he admitted. "I have been alone for so long that I forgot what it felt like to care about someone. You scared me when you made me realize how empty my life had become. But I would rather be scared and alive than safe and just existing." Katherine leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. They stayed that way for a long moment, breathing together, drawing strength from each other. Then, slowly, Katherine tilted her head up, and their lips met in a kiss that was gentle at first, tentative, then deeper as weeks of unspoken feelings poured out. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Fletcher smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Well," he said, "I guess we are doing this." Katherine laughed, the sound breaking the tension. "I guess we are, whatever this is." "This is me falling in love with you," Fletcher said simply, in case that was not clear. "It is clear now," Katherine said, her eyes shining. "And for the record, I am falling in love with you too." They spent the rest of the day together, no longer dancing around their feelings. Fletcher taught Katherine to shoot with his rifle, showing her how to sight down the barrel and squeeze the trigger gently. She was a natural, hitting the target he set up after only a few tries. "My father taught me the basics," she explained, "but I have not practiced in years. You are doing great. If we need to defend ourselves, I want to know you can handle a weapon." That evening, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Duke sprawled at their feet. Katherine leaned against Fletcher's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, feeling a contentment he had never experienced before. "Tell me about your dreams," Katherine said. "If you could have anything, what would your life look like?" Fletcher thought about it. "I would expand the ranch, get more cattle, maybe build a bigger house, something with real rooms and a proper kitchen. I would fix up my mother's garden and keep it beautiful. I would have a family, children running around, life and noise filling up all these empty spaces." "That sounds wonderful," Katherine said softly. "What about you? What do you dream about?" "Honestly, I used to dream about adventure, seeing new places, living in a city maybe. But after everything that has happened, my dreams have changed. Now I dream about safety, about waking up without fear, about having a home that cannot be taken away, about belonging somewhere." She paused. "About belonging with someone." "You belong here," Fletcher said, tightening his arm around her. "If you want to stay, you belong here with me." "Is that a proposal, Mr. Yates?" Katherine asked with a teasing smile. "Not yet," Fletcher said. "When I propose, it will be proper. You will know it when it happens." 3 weeks after Katherine had arrived, Fletcher received a response from her uncle in Casper. The man was devastated to learn of his brother's death and relieved that Katherine had survived. He offered her a home with him and his family, promising she would be safe and cared for. Fletcher handed Katherine the letter and watched her read it, his heart heavy. This was what she needed, a safe place with family. He could not ask her to stay here where danger might find her, where life would be hard and uncertain. As much as it hurt, he had to let her go. "He seems kind," Katherine said when she finished reading. "He talks about his wife and his 3 children. He says I would have my own room, that they would welcome me as family." "That is good," Fletcher said, trying to keep his voice neutral. "It sounds like a good situation for you." Katherine set the letter down and looked at Fletcher seriously. "Is that what you want? For me to go to Casper?" "I want you to be safe and happy," Fletcher said honestly. "If that means going to your uncle, then yes, that is what I want." "You are a terrible liar, Fletcher Yates," Katherine said, standing and walking over to where he sat. She straddled his lap, forcing him to look directly at her. "Tell me the truth. What do you really want?" Fletcher met her eyes, seeing the challenge and the hope there. "I want you to stay," he admitted. "I want to wake up every morning and see you in my home. I want to build a life with you. I want everything I told you about my dreams, but I want it with you specifically. But I also know that is selfish. I cannot protect you the way your uncle could. I cannot give you the life you deserve." "Stop deciding what I deserve," Katherine said firmly. "I deserve to choose my own life, and I choose this. I choose you. I choose this ranch and that garden and Duke and everything that comes with it." "The danger does not just disappear because we want it to," Fletcher warned. "The gang is still out there. Then we face it together. Fletcher, I have been running and hiding since my father died. I am tired of being afraid. Here, with you, I finally feel like I can breathe again. I feel like myself. I am not giving that up without a fight." Fletcher pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "You are sure? This is really what you want?" "I have never been more sure of anything." They wrote back to Katherine's uncle together, thanking him for his offer, but explaining that Katherine had found safety and was building a new life in Buffalo. They did not mention the specifics of their relationship, but the implication was clear enough. As fall deepened into early winter, Fletcher and Katherine settled into their life together. They worked side by side on the ranch, Katherine proving herself capable with everything from mending harnesses to helping with the cattle. The garden flourished under her care, providing vegetables that they preserved for the winter months ahead. One evening in late October, as the first snow of the season began to fall, Fletcher asked Katherine to come outside with him. She bundled up in her wool shawl and followed him into the garden, now mostly dormant for the winter, except for the hardy plants that could survive the cold. "My mother planted this rosebush the year she married my father," Fletcher said, standing before a thorny bush that still held a few late-blooming roses. "She always said roses were her favorite because they were beautiful, but tough. They survived the harsh winters and came back stronger every spring." He picked one of the remaining roses, careful of the thorns, and turned to face Katherine. "Katherine Nash, these past months with you have been the best of my life. You brought light back into the darkness I did not even know I was living in. You made me believe in the future again. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love someone." Fletcher got down on one knee in the light snow, pulling a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple gold band set with a small diamond, his mother's ring that his father had given her. "Will you marry me? Will you stay here and build this life with me? I cannot promise it will be easy, but I can promise that I will love you and protect you and stand by you for as long as I live." Tears were streaming down Katherine's face as she nodded. "Yes," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you." Fletcher stood and slipped the ring onto her finger, then kissed her deeply as snow fell around them. Duke barked happily from the porch, as if he understood the significance of the moment. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Buffalo, with the minister and a few of Fletcher's neighbors as witnesses. Katherine wore the green dress Fletcher had bought her, and Fletcher wore his best suit, carefully preserved from his father's funeral. It was a simple ceremony, but Katherine had never seen Fletcher look happier or more handsome than he did when he said his vows. "I, Fletcher Yates, take you, Katherine Nash, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as we both shall live." When it was Katherine's turn, her voice was steady and clear. "I, Katherine Nash, take you, Fletcher Yates, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, honor you, and stand by you through whatever comes. You saved my life in that barn, but you did more than that. You gave me a reason to want to live again. I will love you for as long as I breathe." The minister pronounced them husband and wife, and when Fletcher kissed his bride, the small gathering applauded. They celebrated with a simple meal at the local restaurant, and Fletcher found himself surrounded by neighbors congratulating him, telling him how lucky he was, how good it was to see him happy again. "Your parents would be proud," old Mr. Henderson from the neighboring ranch told him, shaking his hand firmly. "They would be happy to see you settled with a good woman." That night, in the home they now officially shared, Fletcher carried Katherine over the threshold as tradition dictated. They made love for the first time as husband and wife, tender and passionate and full of the promise of their future together. Afterwards, lying in each other's arms, Katherine traced patterns on Fletcher's chest with her finger. "Are you happy?" she asked. "Happier than I knew was possible," Fletcher replied honestly. "You?" "So happy it scares me a little. Like, maybe I do not deserve this much happiness after everything that happened." "We both deserve this," Fletcher said firmly. "Your father would want you to be happy. He would want you to have a full life, not to spend it mourning him." "I think he would have liked you," Katherine said with a smile. "He respected hard workers and honest men. You are both of those things." Winter settled over Wyoming with its usual harshness, but inside the ranch house, Fletcher and Katherine were warm and content. They spent long evenings by the fire, Fletcher reading aloud while Katherine sewed or knitted. She was making baby clothes, not because she was expecting yet, but because she wanted to be prepared for when they eventually started their family. It was on a particularly cold night in January, when the wind howled outside and snow piled up against the windows, that their peaceful existence was shattered. Duke started barking frantically around midnight, the same urgent alarm bark he had used the day he found Katherine in the barn. Fletcher was instantly awake, reaching for his rifle. "Stay here," he told Katherine, but she was already getting up and reaching for the pistol Fletcher had taught her to use. "We are in this together, remember?" she said firmly. They moved to the window carefully, staying in the shadows. In the moonlight reflecting off the snow, Fletcher could see 5 riders approaching the house. His blood ran cold. Even from a distance, he could tell these were not friendly visitors. Nobody rode up to an isolated ranch in the dead of night with good intentions. "It is them," Katherine whispered, her face going white. "It has to be. How did they find me?" Fletcher's mind raced. They could not outrun riders in this snow, and the house, while sturdy, was not designed as a fortress. Their best chance was to defend from inside and hope the riders would give up, or that Fletcher could hold them off until help arrived, though help was miles away. "Get to the bedroom," Fletcher told Katherine. "Block the door with the dresser. There is a window you can escape through if necessary. Take Duke with you." "I am not leaving you alone to fight them," Katherine protested. "Katherine, please," Fletcher said urgently. "I need to know you are as safe as possible. I cannot think straight if I am worried about you being in the crossfire. Please do this for me." Reluctantly, Katherine went to the bedroom with Duke. though Fletcher could tell from her expression that she had no intention of hiding if things went badly. He positioned himself by the front window with his rifle, waiting. The riders stopped about 50 yards from the house, spreading out in a loose semicircle. One of them, a large man on a black horse, called out in a voice that carried across the snow. "Fletcher Yates, we know you have got something that belongs to us. Send out the girl and we will leave peaceful like. Nobody needs to die tonight." Fletcher's finger tightened on the rifle trigger. So, they did know Katherine was here? Someone must have talked, someone in town who noticed too much. It did not matter now how they found out. What mattered was keeping Katherine safe. "There is no girl here," Fletcher called back. "You are trespassing on private property. Leave now, or I will defend my home." The man on the black horse laughed, a cruel sound that carried on the wind. "Do not play dumb, rancher. We know Katherine Nash is in there. She saw too much. She needs to come with us." "Over my dead body," Fletcher shouted. "That can be arranged," the man replied. "Boys, light it up." Two of the riders pulled out torches and rode toward the barn. Fletcher's heart sank. They were going to burn him out, destroy his property to force him to surrender Katherine. He could not let that happen. He took careful aim and fired, hitting one of the torch carriers in the shoulder. The man screamed and dropped his torch in the snow where it fizzled out. The other riders immediately opened fire on the house, bullets slamming into the wooden walls and shattering windows. Fletcher dropped below the window, then moved to another position and fired again, hitting one of the horses. The animal screamed and bolted, throwing its rider into the snow. But there were still 4 of them, and only one of him, and they had spread out enough that he could not watch all of them at once. He heard glass breaking from the back of the house and realized with horror that someone had circled around. Before he could move, the back door crashed open and a man burst in, gun drawn. Fletcher spun and fired, but the man was fast. The bullet grazed the outlaw's arm instead of hitting center mass. The man returned fire, and Fletcher felt burning pain tear through his left shoulder. He stumbled back, but managed to fire again, this time hitting the intruder in the chest. The man went down hard. "Fletcher!" Katherine's voice came from the bedroom, and then she was there, firing the pistol at another figure trying to come through the back door. Her shot was true, hitting the man in the leg and sending him sprawling back outside with a howl of pain. "I told you to stay in the bedroom!" Fletcher shouted, pressing his hand to his bleeding shoulder. "And I told you we are in this together!" Katherine shouted back, taking position beside him. The remaining outlaws, seeing 2 of their number down and realizing they faced armed resistance, seemed to reconsider their approach. The man on the black horse shouted orders, and they regrouped near the barn, out of easy rifle range. "You have got 1 hour to think about it, Yates," the leader called out. "Send out the girl, or we burn everything to the ground. Your house, your barn, your cattle, everything you got will be ashes by morning." Fletcher and Katherine huddled behind cover, Fletcher bleeding steadily from his shoulder wound. Katherine tore strips from her nightgown and pressed them against the injury, trying to stop the bleeding. "You need a doctor," she said, her voice tight with worry. "What I need is for those bastards to leave," Fletcher said through gritted teeth. "Katherine, maybe you should consider their offer. I cannot hold them off forever, and you can still escape through the bedroom window while they are waiting for an answer." "Absolutely not," Katherine said fiercely. "I am not letting them burn our home, and I am certainly not surrendering to them. We need another option." Fletcher's vision swam slightly from blood loss, but he forced himself to focus. "There is a storm cellar outside the kitchen door. If we can make it there, it has got a hidden exit that comes out near the tree line. My father built it as an escape route during Indian troubles years ago. We could get away, head for town. But they will burn the house. Houses can be rebuilt. You cannot." Fletcher touched her face gently. "Katherine, you are more important than any building. If we lose the house but survive, we can start over. But I cannot lose you. I will not." Katherine kissed him quickly, tasting salt from her own tears. "All right, we go together. What about the man inside?" Fletcher glanced at the outlaw he had shot. The man was clearly dead, eyes staring at nothing. "Leave him. We need to move now before they realize what we are doing." They gathered what supplies they could quickly, some food and water, ammunition, blankets. Fletcher was moving slower due to his injury, but adrenaline kept him going. Duke stayed close, sensing the danger and ready to protect his people. "On 3, Fletcher said as they crouched by the kitchen door. 1, 2, 3. They burst out of the house and ran for the storm cellar, Duke racing ahead. Shots rang out immediately as the outlaws spotted them, bullets kicking up snow around their feet. Fletcher pushed Katherine ahead of him, using his body as a shield. They reached the cellar and Fletcher yanked open the doors, practically throwing Katherine inside before following with Duke. Bullets pinged off the wooden doors as he slammed them shut and dropped the bar into place. The cellar was dark and cold, but it was sturdy. Fletcher lit a small lantern that was kept there for emergencies, revealing a space about 10 feet by 10 feet, with shelves of preserved foods and emergency supplies. At the back, hidden behind a false wall that looked like part of the stone foundation, was the tunnel his father had dug. "Are you all right?" Fletcher asked Katherine, checking her over for injuries. "I am fine. You are the one who has been shot. Sit down and let me look at that shoulder properly." In the lantern light, Katherine examined Fletcher's wound. The bullet had passed through the fleshy part of his shoulder, missing the bone, but causing significant bleeding. She cleaned it as best she could with whiskey from the emergency supplies and bound it tightly with clean cloth. Above them, they could hear the outlaws shouting and moving around. Then came the smell of smoke. "They are burning the house," Katherine said, tears streaming down her face as she worked on Fletcher's shoulder. "Our home." "We will build another one," Fletcher promised, pulling her close despite the pain in his shoulder. "As long as we are together, that is what matters. The house is just wooden nails." They waited in the cellar as long as they dared, listening to the sounds of destruction above. Finally, when they heard the outlaws mounting up and riding away, convinced that their targets had perished in the fire, Fletcher and Katherine made their move. The hidden tunnel was narrow and uncomfortable, but it led them safely away from the burning house to an exit concealed among rocks and brush near the tree line. They emerged into the freezing winter night to see their home engulfed in flames, lighting up the darkness with terrible beauty. The barn was burning too, though Fletcher had been able to release the horses earlier in the fight, and he could see them in the distance, safe from the flames. "Come on," Fletcher said, taking Katherine's hand. "We need to get to Buffalo. It is about 10 miles on foot. Can you make it?" "I will make it," Katherine said with determination. "We both will." The journey through the snow was brutal. Fletcher was weakening from blood loss, and the cold was intense. Katherine supported him as much as she could, Duke leading the way through the darkness. They had to stop several times for Fletcher to rest, and Katherine was terrified that he would collapse and she would not be able to get him moving again. "Talk to me," Fletcher said during one rest stop, his voice slurred with exhaustion. "Tell me something, anything, keep me awake." "Do you remember the first time you kissed me?" Katherine asked, rubbing his arms to keep him warm. "In the house after you told me you were falling in love with me?" "I remember," Fletcher said, managing a weak smile. "Best moment of my life up to that point." "Mine too. And do you know what I thought right before you kissed me? I thought, this is the man I am going to spend my life with. I knew it with absolute certainty. So, you cannot die on me now, Fletcher Yates. We have got too much living left to do." "Yes, madam," Fletcher said. "I will do my best." It took them nearly 6 hours to reach Buffalo, arriving just as dawn was breaking. They stumbled into the sheriff's office, both nearly frozen, Fletcher barely conscious. The sheriff, a man named Tom Crawford who knew Fletcher well, immediately sent for the doctor and organized a posse to go after the Garrett gang. The doctor, an older man named Dr. Phillips, patched up Fletcher's shoulder properly and declared that he would recover fully with rest and care. Katherine refused to leave his side, staying in the clinic where they had set up a bed for him. "You should be resting too," Dr. Phillips told Katherine. "You have been through an ordeal." "I will rest when I know he is all right," Katherine said firmly. Sheriff Crawford returned that afternoon with grim news. The posse had tracked the gang to an old mining camp where a fierce gun battle had erupted. 3 of the gang members were dead, including the leader. 2 had been captured and would stand trial for murder and arson. The reign of terror the Garrett gang had inflicted on Wyoming territory was finally over. They had quite a haul of stolen goods at their camp, Sheriff Crawford told Fletcher and Katherine. "We found some things that might have belonged to your father, Mrs. Yates. A pocket watch with the name Samuel Nash engraved on it, some other personal items. I will make sure they are returned to you." Katherine's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Sheriff. That watch belonged to my grandfather. My father treasured it." When they were finally alone, Katherine sat on the edge of Fletcher's bed and took his hand. "It is really over," she said. "We are safe now." "We are," Fletcher agreed. "But we have lost everything. The house, the barn, most of our supplies. I do not know how we are going to rebuild." "The same way we got through everything else," Katherine said firmly. "Together. We will start small and work our way back up. The land is still ours. The cattle survived. We have each other. That is more than enough to build on." As Fletcher recovered over the following weeks, the people of Buffalo showed their true character. Neighbors arrived with donations of building materials, food, and supplies. They organized work parties to help clear the burned remains of the house and start building a new one. Fletcher tried to refuse the charity, but Katherine convinced him to accept it. "Let people help," she said. "You would do the same for any of them. This is what community means." By the time spring arrived, a new house stood on the foundation of the old one. It was larger than before, with proper rooms including a real bedroom, a spacious kitchen, and even a small parlor. Fletcher's mother's rosebush had survived the fire, protected by the snow that had covered it, and it bloomed that spring more beautifully than it had in years. Katherine's garden flourished under her care, expanding beyond what Fletcher's mother had planted. They acquired chickens and a milk cow, rebuilding their homestead piece by piece. The work was hard, but they tackled it together, and Fletcher found that everything was easier with Katherine by his side. In the fall, nearly a year after that terrible winter night, Katherine told Fletcher she was expecting their first child. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests to be careful. "We are going to be parents," Fletcher said, his eyes shining with joy. "You are going to be a mother." "And you are going to be a father," Katherine said, cupping his face in her hands. "Are you ready for that?" "With you, I am ready for anything." Their son was born the following spring, on a beautiful May morning when the wildflowers covered the prairie in every color imaginable. Fletcher was present for the birth, holding Katherine's hand through every contraction, murmuring encouragement and love. When the baby finally arrived, healthy and loud, the doctor placed him in Fletcher's arms. "What should we name him?" Katherine asked, exhausted but glowing with happiness. Fletcher looked down at the tiny face of his son and felt his heart expand with a love he had never imagined possible. "Samuel," he said, "after your father, Samuel Yates, so he never forgets the brave man his grandfather was." Katherine's eyes filled with tears. "That is perfect. My father would have been so proud." Little Samuel grew strong and healthy, with his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. 2 years later, a daughter joined the family, whom they named Rose after Fletcher's mother, and the bush that had survived the fire. She had Fletcher's blue eyes and Katherine's delicate features, and she had both her parents wrapped around her tiny finger from the moment she was born. Life on the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Fletcher's cattle operation grew successful, and he was able to hire a couple of hands to help with the work. Katherine's garden became famous in Buffalo, and she started selling preserves and vegetables in town, earning her own income. She also started teaching piano to children in Buffalo, having finally convinced Fletcher to buy a piano so she could play again. On quiet evenings after the children were asleep, Fletcher and Katherine would sit on their porch watching the sunset, much as they had done in those early days of their relationship. Duke, now older and grayer but still faithful, would lie at their feet, content in his old age. "Do you ever think about that night?" Katherine asked one evening, referring to the attack that had destroyed their first home. "Do you regret helping me?" Fletcher pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Not for a single second. That night led us here, to this life, to our children. Every hardship was worth it to have what we have now." "I love you, Fletcher Yates," Katherine said softly, "more than I thought it was possible to love another person." "I love you too, Katherine. You saved my life just as much as I saved yours. Before you came, I was just existing, going through the motions. You made me live again." 5 years after Samuel was born, Katherine gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Daniel and Grace. The house that had once seemed so spacious now rang with the laughter and chaos of 4 children. Fletcher built an addition to give the growing family more room, and Katherine expanded her garden even further to feed their hungry brood. Samuel grew into a thoughtful boy who loved reading and learning, often following his mother around, asking endless questions about everything from how plants grew to why the sky was blue. Rose was adventurous and fearless, always climbing trees and exploring, keeping her parents on their toes. Daniel was quiet but observant, content to watch and learn before trying things himself. Grace was the baby of the family and utterly fearless, determined to keep up with her older siblings no matter what. Fletcher taught his children to ride and rope and care for the cattle, while Katherine taught them to read and write and appreciate beauty in the world around them. Together, they raised children who were educated and capable, kind and strong, ready to face whatever challenges the future held. One summer evening when Samuel was 10, he asked his parents how they met. Fletcher and Katherine exchanged a look, silently communicating in the way long married couples do. "Well," Fletcher began, "it all started with Duke. He was younger then, and he started barking one afternoon while I was working. I followed him to the barn, and there was your mother, hiding in the hay." "Why were you hiding, Mama?" Rose asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. Katherine pulled her daughter close. "I was in trouble, and your father helped me. He saved my life that day." "Papa is a hero," Daniel said with certainty. "Your mother is the real hero," Fletcher said, looking at Katherine with all the love he felt reflected in his eyes. "She is the bravest person I know. She faced terrible things and survived them. She rebuilt her life from nothing. She gave me a reason to hope again when I had forgotten how." "We saved each other," Katherine said simply. "That is what people who love each other do. They help each other through the hard times and celebrate the good times together." The children seemed satisfied with this answer, and the conversation moved on to other topics. But later, after the children were in bed, Katherine found Fletcher standing in what remained of his mother's garden, now much larger and more beautiful than it had been in his mother's time. "What are you thinking about?" Katherine asked, slipping her hand into his. "I am thinking about how strange life is," Fletcher said. "How one moment, one decision can change everything. If Duke had not found you that day, if I had not helped you, none of this would exist. Our children would not exist. This life we built would not exist. But Duke did find me, and you did help me, and here we are," Katherine said. "Everything happened exactly as it was supposed to." "Do you ever miss your father? Wish he could have known your children?" Fletcher asked gently. "Every day," Katherine admitted. "But I like to think he can see us somehow, that he knows I found happiness and safety and love, that he knows his grandchildren are being raised with the same values he taught me. I carry him with me in everything I do." They stood together in the twilight, surrounded by the garden Katherine had nurtured and the land Fletcher had worked, listening to the peaceful sounds of their ranch. From inside the house came the sound of one of the twins crying, and then Samuel's voice calming his little sister. The ordinary sounds of family life, the sounds that made a house a home. "We should go in," Katherine said. "Grace probably had another nightmare." "In a minute," Fletcher said, turning to face his wife. "I just want to look at you for a moment. Really look at you. Sometimes I still cannot believe you are real, that this life is real. I am afraid I will wake up and find it was all a dream." "I am real," Katherine said, standing on her toes to kiss him. "This is real, and it is only going to get better." And she was right. The years passed, bringing their share of challenges and changes, but Fletcher and Katherine faced them together as they always had. The ranch continued to prosper, and their children grew strong and capable. Samuel went to college back east, studying law, but he always returned home for summers, unable to stay away from the land he loved. Rose married a neighboring rancher's son, a good man who Fletcher approved of, and they settled on a property adjoining the Yates ranch. Daniel took over running the cattle operation when Fletcher's back started bothering him, showing a natural talent for ranching that made his father proud. Grace became a teacher in Buffalo, educating a new generation of children. As Fletcher and Katherine grew older, their love only deepened. They had weathered storms together, both literal and figurative, and had come out stronger for it. They had built not just a ranch and a family, but a legacy of resilience and love that would outlast them both. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Fletcher took Katherine back to the spot where he had proposed to her, where his mother's rosebush still bloomed faithfully every year. Their hair was now streaked with gray, and their hands bore the calluses and scars of a life of hard work. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the young people who had fallen in love all those years ago. "I would do it all again," Fletcher said, holding Katherine close. "Every hardship, every challenge, every moment of fear and uncertainty. I would do it all again to end up right here with you." "As would I," Katherine said. You gave me back my life, Fletcher. You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me love when I thought I would never feel it again. You gave me a family and a home and a purpose. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Fletcher corrected gently. "That is how love works. We filled each other's empty spaces and made something beautiful together." Years later, when Fletcher and Katherine were both in their 70s, surrounded by children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren, they would still sit on their porch in the evenings watching the sunset. Duke had long since passed, but his descendants continued to work the ranch and guard the family. The original house they had rebuilt together had been expanded and improved over the years, but remained the heart of the ranch, the place where the Yates family gathered for holidays and celebrations. One particularly beautiful evening, with the sky painted in shades of pink and gold, Katherine rested her head on Fletcher's shoulder as they rocked slowly in their chairs. Their youngest grandson, named Fletcher after his grandfather, was running around the yard chasing chickens while his parents tried to corral him for dinner. "Do you know what I think about sometimes?" Katherine asked, her voice soft with age but still strong. "What is that, my love?" "I think about that terrified girl hiding in your barn, bleeding and certain she was going to die. I think about how lost and broken she felt. And then I look at all of this," Katherine gestured to the ranch, the family, the life they had built, "and I am amazed at how far we have come. That girl was never as lost as she thought she was," Fletcher said. "She was brave and strong and smart. She just needed someone to remind her of that. She needed a safe place to heal and rediscover her strength. I was lucky enough to be the one who could give her that." "We were both lucky," Katherine said. "Lucky that Duke found me that day. Lucky that you were kind enough to help a stranger. Lucky that we found love when we least expected it." Fletcher kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "Luck had nothing to do with it. It was fate. It was meant to be. You were meant to hide in my barn, and I was meant to find you, and we were meant to build this beautiful life together." As the sun set and the stars began to appear in the vast Wyoming sky, Fletcher and Katherine sat surrounded by the evidence of their love, the ranch they had built together, the children they had raised, the legacy they would leave behind. It had all started with a dog's urgent barking and a frightened woman hiding in a barn, bleeding and desperate for help. It had blossomed into a love story that would be told for generations, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope and healing and happiness are possible. Their grandson finally tired himself out and was carried inside by his father. The family gathered around the dinner table, multiple generations sharing a meal and telling stories, the way the Yates family had done for decades. Fletcher and Katherine watched from their places at the head of the table, their hands joined as they always were, their love as strong at 70 as it had been at 30. Later, as they prepared for bed in the room they had shared for 20 years, Fletcher helped Katherine brush out her long silver hair, a nightly ritual they had maintained throughout their marriage. In the mirror, their eyes met, and they smiled at each other with the comfortable intimacy of a couple who had weathered everything life could throw at them and come through together. "I love you, Katherine Yates," Fletcher said, the same words he had spoken to her thousands of times over the years, words that never lost their meaning or their power. "I love you, Fletcher Yates," Katherine replied, reaching back to squeeze his hand. "Today, tomorrow, and always." They climbed into bed, fitting together the way they had for 2 decades, Fletcher's arm around Katherine's waist, her head resting on his chest. Outside, an owl hooted in the distance and the wind whispered through the prairie grass. Inside, surrounded by the home they had built and the love they had nurtured, Fletcher and Katherine drifted off to sleep, content in the knowledge that they had lived a life worth living. The ranch would continue after them, passed down to their children and grandchildren. The stories of the Garrett gang and the fire and the long walk through the snow would become family legend, told and retold with each generation. But the real legacy Fletcher and Katherine left behind was not the land or the cattle, or even the dramatic story of how they met. Their real legacy was the love they had shown each other every single day, through joy and sorrow, through prosperity and hardship, through health and illness. They had proven that love could heal even the deepest wounds, that courage could overcome any obstacle, and that 2 people who committed to standing together could build something that would outlast them both. And on quiet evenings when the wind blew just right across the Wyoming prairie, people claimed they could still feel the love that Fletcher and Katherine Yates had built in that place. It was in the roses that bloomed faithfully every spring, descended from the bush that had survived the fire. It was in the sturdy walls of the ranch house that had sheltered generations of their family. It was in the very soil itself, enriched by years of care and cultivation. Their love had become part of the land, enduring and constant, a testament to what two people could create when they chose to face life together. The story that began with a dog's barking and a bleeding woman hiding in a barn had become a love story for the ages, proof that sometimes the worst moments in life lead us exactly where we are meant to be. Fletcher and Katherine had found each other in the darkness and had created light together, a light that continued to shine long after they were gone, illuminating the way for all who came after them. And that, more than anything, was the true measure of a life well lived and a love well shared.